rendition of My Way.
Let's do it. I want to see it.
That's a good one. No one.
I've never liked that song, that's why I sang it good. I don't understand, if you've only had a few regrets, why would you even mention regrets in your song? Regrets, I've had a few, but then again, too few to mention. But you've just mentioned you've had regrets.
How about you do Dean Martin?
Job since then in terms of returns on our legacy fund investments. Nathan and Tim from TDW PIC will be here after Karen's session. The order was that there would be about a 1 hour session from Karen. I don't think Karen has 1 hour of material. It was also planned that TDW PIC would have 1 hour. They're likely to take 1 hour. They go into great detail. They've got a very good presentation, and they love to give us information. And then the agenda did say that we would have a 15-minute session at the end for questions. However, given the numbers we've got, I prefer to have questions as we go. So if anything comes up during a presentation, sometimes it's hard if you're listening to 1 hour presentation to remember something that happened at the 10-minute mark, if you have to wait another 45 minutes or whatever to ask questions. So please raise your hand and ask the experts questions as you go. I'm not familiar with all the terms that get used in discussions like this, so sometimes you'll either want to ask a question about what do you mean by that, or a question about something specific. And the other thing to remember is these are general presentations. Everyone's life circumstances are different. Everyone here attending will probably have a different life story, and you're at different stages. Some folks are younger and probably are thinking about planned giving over their life. Others are, shall I say, a little more than younger, or a little more advanced in age. There's some delicate way to say that, and I can't think of it right now.
A little more seasoned.
A little more seasoned. I'm probably thinking about giving in later life, if we want to put it that way. So everyone will have specifics. One thing we did discuss with the experts was if you have something really specific about your particular position or where you're at in life, and you don't want to share the details with the group, you can also, we have contact details for Karen and for our TD Wealth folks. So if you have something really specific, you can always contact them after the session to talk about specifics and how they would advise you for your particular situation. So general questions are fine today, but if you don't feel comfortable with very specific personal details, you will have an opportunity to contact the folks after the sessions. I think that's everything. ran through the agenda. Knox has had so many sessions in the past, but as the congregation changes, the composition of the congregation changes, and life events change, and laws and legislation change. What you maybe knew 5-10 years ago may have been replaced by different legislation and different opportunities for planned giving throughout your life. So for those who've gone through this before, it's a good way to get a refresher. For those who haven't, it's a good way to get current information that you can, or that can guide your planned giving over your life. I'd also like to thank folks who helped with the logistics today. Reverend Jackie, thank you for passing on messages, mixed though some of them may have been, to Joe and Gary, and also to others who have helped. I'd like to thank Jeanette and Margaret Aiken for looking after the catering. At one stage I was in charge of the catering, but that went nowhere, of course, so thank you ladies for stepping in and looking after the catering. I'd also like to thank our experts. Thank you again, Karen, for being here. And I'll thank the TD Waterhouse guys whenever they get here. So the last thing that I want to cover is the composition of the current trustee team. I currently am chair and treasurer of the team. Previously I was treasurer, but in August I took over the role of chair for the remainder of 2024. This is 2024, right? So for the remainder of 2024, there will, with the amalgamation, there will be upcoming elections for a new slate of trustees to start operating looking after the funds of the amalgamated church on January 1st, 2025. But in the meantime, I'm your chair and treasurer. Jeanette continues to be our secretary. Jeanette's in her second term as trustee, as am I. I think we joined the team about 5 years ago at the same time. And then Peter Capps was coming towards the end of his first term. Unfortunately, Peter's had some health issues and isn't able to participate today. John Aiken joined us last year. John's got a lot of experience, but this is his he is in his first term as a trustee. Most recently, also, Vero joined us in August whenever we needed to add an additional trustee. So our current team is 5 folks. If you ever need to talk to any of us about anything to do with the Legacy Fund, we're all available, and I think our names are somewhere in the church, the online church website. So did anyone have any questions or comments or anything before we get into the formal sessions? Either I've given too much information or everyone's stunned by what you've heard. So we are at, I should say online. This will be streamed online. Folks will be able to access it and take it to the start to see the full presentation. But now we are moving on from my introduction to Karen. I was talking to Karen. I've never met Karen before, but we were having a chat, and I really enjoyed your sermon today. Great background on your career. And the one thing I was telling Karen is I grew up on a farm, but as I was a teenager and I looked at the farm, I thought, I'm never going to be a farmer. And I was glad to get away from the farm. I took more of an academic path in life. And I've never been able to understand people that I've met in Canada who have chosen to get into hobby farming or take over a farm. And I think they need their heads examined. But sometimes people find their passion, and it is something that people get passionate about at a certain stage in life. And as Karen said, it's a good mix of it's something to do instead of sitting in an office 5 days a week or whatever. You know, you need to have passion to be out there at midnight delivering lambs and looking after sheep and all of that. But I think Karen's got the passion and hasn't regretted her involvement with that. I don't understand that thought, but I'm now solidly an office guy, and as I head towards retirement, I have no intention of going back to farming. So without further ado, I'll let Carol take over with her session.
Okay, we'll see if we can get technology to work and my voice to last. So I'll just correct one thing. I never have problems going for an hour or more, so I always have enough material. I've been doing this for long enough now. You can throw any question at me. I might not be able to answer them all. I'll let you know if you come up with a truly unique question, but I'm doubtful. And if I can't answer it, I will see what I can do. I'm sure the TD people will be able to answer much better. And last time I was here doing a presentation, I did sort of the stewardship stuff plus the stuff that TD is going to cover. So I'm quite happy to let the experts delve into the whys and hows and the exact details of making a planned gift and sort of the tax benefits of that. So that's great. So my idea here was that I would talk about a little bit why we do planned giving, why legacy gifts, so sort of the why and how it can impact ministry, the difference it can make here at the congregation. I'm also happy to ask any of your questions, because I know we've got some Board of Trustee people. I'm sure some of you might be on session or Board of Managers. Any question you have about fundraising, legacy gifts, the role of the church, raising money, you can throw them at me as well. So yeah, I wanted to start by reminding us that stewardship, and this is what I was trying to get at in the sermon a little bit, is really not about giving to a budget. And I think very often as a church, we've heard as the stewardship committee is the one who's raising the money to pay the church budget. And it's not interconnected, because we do encourage people when they give, we encourage them to give to the church. And people aren't going to give to the church if they don't know what your plans are for the funds. And in order to decide when they're going to give, if they're going to give part of their income to give to the church, instead of giving to a university or a hospital or another nonprofit, they want to know how are you going to handle the money, what are you going to do with it. So it's very interconnected, because I can decide I want to tithe my income, but I can decide, well, I'll give 3% to the church and a little bit here and a little bit there. Or I could decide, oh, well, the church doesn't do a very good job with my funds, or they don't have any mission or vision, so I'm just going to give it elsewhere. So it's very interconnected, and the budget is basically your presentation to the church and congregation to say, these are our plans for how God will use the gifts that you are giving on Sunday, and so it's not interconnected. But when you're asking people to give, if you're just saying, oh, well, here's our budget, dig in a little more, you actually can be limiting yourself. I was at a stewardship conference in September with PCUSA and PCC congregations. It was interesting. They did a study across the states in Canada, and they figured out, on average, churchgoers are giving 1% of their income to the church. Now, some treasurers might be, yeah, I can see that. There's several people who are a portion of who give much more than 1%, who are definitely giving 10%, people may be giving 20%, might depend on their stage in life, some might give 3%. There's also people who aren't giving anything to the church, but 1% is kind of where it balances out. So sometimes we can be reluctant to encourage people to give because we think everybody's at their maximum, everybody's giving as much as they can. Well, there will be some people who might be at their maximum, but most people probably could even double their gifts. They could go to 2% and they might not feel it that much. So if you're talking about stewardship, talking about proportional giving and what responding out of what you have is more effective, then you can say, well, here's our minimum church budget, but we have a dream budget. If we bring in more than this, don't worry, we're going to program that, and this is how we're going to program it. We're going to do more outreach to the community, more this. This is what we'd like to grow, and this is what we grow. So, stewardship, if I'm talking to individuals, it's responding to the call of God in our lives with all of our gifts, our time, treasure, and talent. And sometimes people ask me, this one, I'm sure you have experienced, is becoming more and more valuable. There may be some people who say, I cannot volunteer for another committee, please. I will give you some more on the offering plate, but don't ask me to volunteer my time because I'm already too busy. So I have congregations sometimes ask me, actually, we're not doing too bad financially. We want to know, how do we get more people onto our committees? How do we get people more involved? And I know this church is very involved, but there's different strategies you can do with that as well. You could do, shorter opportunities. People are sometimes reluctant. I was in a congregation just last Sunday, the congregation I was in, somebody said, oh yeah, well, I used to be an elder, and they asked me, well, how long is the commitment for elder? Somebody outside the church. Oh, it was an elder for life. But then they did some shifting and went to term eldership. And he said he had left the church for a while, and he came back, and he said, I wasn't ready to be an elder. But I told them I could do a project, Give me a project. Great. Well, that's it. So people are more willing to do projects, short term. And he's like, once that project wrapped up, I might do another project. And I might do another project. And then suddenly you might find that somebody has spent their whole life doing projects. Essentially, they became a term elder, but they didn't know it. So anyway, that's just sort of some ideas. Oh yeah. So I thought I would plant to you that we want the language we use when talking about stewardship, and particularly financial stewardship, to reflect our theology. So you think, okay, well that sounds nice, but what does it actually mean? So one thing is that grace. Sometimes we don't use a lot of grace language when we talk about money or giving to the church. Instead, we hear things like, we're behind budget and we need more, and are you giving enough, or have you done this or that? So we want to, everyone, and when I do the stories I say, I'm so glad because I have learned, I've been doing stewardship as my full-time job for 18 years, and I still am learning things to do, and sometimes I, not so good, and sometimes I'm good. I'm so glad that we aren't looking for perfection, we're looking for grace. And so find whatever way you can participate, whatever gifts you have available right now to share. It might be money, it might be time, maybe it'll be a combination of both, but then share it and be at peace. Accept the grace. Say, this is where I'm at right now, maybe I can grow my skills. I love this book. This is a great little devotional book, Gracious Stewardship, and it's developing the church in the way of Jesus. But I liked this quote because it talks a lot about how sometimes, this is particularly, I think, can happen in Presbyterian churches, where we like to pull up our bootstraps and tighten our belts and do all of those good things, and we like everything in nice, good financial order. We tend to be planners a little bit, organizers. So it's important when we're looking at Scripture to remember that God loves those who give generously and those who don't give at all. God welcomes those who are consistent and faithful ones, and those who are impulsive and erratic. And God forgives the sinful and the self-righteous. So sometimes we have to be careful that we don't, when we're talking about stewardship and giving, it can be very easy to be like, okay, I gave and I do my tithe and I'm doing all of that, and people can come into the church and feel like, I can't participate. Am I still welcome? And we want to say, everybody is welcome. Everybody can participate. There's a great, one of the chapters looks at the story of the father and the prodigal son, and kind of looks at the son who stayed home and was the righteous one, and that, and then the one who was erratic and went off and spent and squandered. And it was like, actually, if you look at the story, God loved both of those sons. And very often the people in the church, we can be thinking we're the good son. And then the prodigal comes back. Are we going to welcome them back and with open arms? Or are we going to judge them? So, it's about joy. I like this. Each of you must give as you have made up your mind. I like that. Think about it. Be intentional. Not reluctantly or under compulsion, for God loves a cheerful giver. So coming here today isn't about us looking together and saying, well, can you give? What are you going to give? What am I going to give? I was at a session meeting once, and we were at a congregation talking about giving, and the woman asked me, she said, well, I actually don't know. I'm on session, and I don't know how much I should be giving each week. And she's like, I kind of have been given the same $20 a week that I've been given since I was a young person. I said, oh, okay. And we talked a little about proportional giving and all this, and she said, oh yeah, maybe I could give a little more now. Anyway, as I was leaving the congregation, the minister said to me, oh, it was so nice to have you, Karen, because, I've never actually preached on stewardship before. And I said, oh, don't worry, I know. But, there was another one that I was reading, and it was a book. It was by a Presbyterian elder. And he said that sometimes we hear the statement, we want to give until it hurts, right? And he said, actually, what if we turn that around and we encourage people to give until it feels good? And when I did the children's story last week at Central, I asked them, how do you feel when you get a gift? And why do we talk about gifts? And how do you feel when you get a birthday gift, Christmas gift? And, oh, we feel really good. We really like that. And I said, well, how do you feel when you give a gift? Oh, yeah, we feel really good when we do that too. Isn't that amazing, the joy that can come both in receiving and in giving gifts? And I think sometimes we can actually be harder as a church at receiving the gifts than we are at giving the gifts. I know when John and I were living on the farm and working on the farm, we were very independent. We liked to do things on our own, and we didn't want to seem like those idiots that come up from the city and get a hobby farm and then do everything wrong. And John had grown up on a farm, so he was a little bit different, but being independent was very important. And when he got sick, I had to learn how to accept help, and that was a much of a lesson. I didn't get into that in the sermon today because there wasn't enough time. I could do a whole series. But learning to receive help and graciously do that is also a gift that you give to other people, because we all have times when we need help and can be vulnerable. So God loves a cheerful giver. Oh yeah, I learned this in international development too. People know when you're a reluctant giver or if there's strings attached. In international development and emergency relief, there was something that we called tide aid. And tide aid was when aid that came with conditions. So the Canadian government we could do food shipments of Canadian wheat to India. Well, that was great for our farmers because we sold our wheat, so we gained something from it. But it flooded the Indian market with wheat, which didn't help their wheat producers. And then the people in India, they don't like to eat wheat anyway. Well, they do make some nice naan bread.
It's okay.
It's still working.
You were echoing, getting feedback before. So
Oh, now I'm not.
Joe is corrected.
Yeah.
Oh, thanks, Joe. Okay, you can still. Okay.
Yeah, we can still hear you.
So they don't they can make some nice naan, but they also like to eat rice locally. So we were not necessarily giving them what they needed or what they wanted. So we shifted the work that we do. We do a lot of food aid work through the Canadian Food Grains Bank. Now, most of the time, the wheat is sold on the open market, and what is needed to do the emergency relief is bought, and it's bought locally so that it helps to rebuild the economy as well. So people know if it's given reluctantly, they know if it's given conditionally, and they know if it's given cheerfully and all of that. So, and this was what I used in the sermon today, but I can never overstate it, which is that you're asked to give out of what you've been given and not out of what you don't have. So we're not looking that you go into debt so that you can make a gift to the church. It's like, what have I been given? There can be different ways. TD's gonna share with us all the different tax benefits. So that can help you give more than you think. But you don't need to go into debt. And some people can say, yeah, but Jesus mentioned the widow who gave everything that she had to the temple. And I never knew this till I worked at the church, and it was like, there's different ways you can read that. The temple was actually exploiting people and constantly needed to be reminded to take care of the poor and the vulnerable. So when Jesus saw this poor, vulnerable woman give everything he had, it's also like, well, what did you ask her to do? Did you say, that you need to give everything? And these other people just making a big show about what they gave. So it's a personal thing, but we don't want to exploit people. We want to gratefully receive your gifts and put them to work in God's kingdom. And if you get some tax benefits, well, that's fantastic, because the government has recognized that congregations, nonprofits, have a great service to the community, and that's why they give a tax break. So you're sort of doing a voluntary tax instead of an involuntary tax. So you get a little bit of relief on your tax. The other thing about taxes is that when I started to give, when I had my newspaper route, or even when I had my first job, I didn't really know. I had no idea about all the tax benefits, because I started to give before there were any tax benefits. But when I was giving out of my income, I realized, oh, wait a minute, I maybe gave $100, but it actually only cost me $45 because of that credit that I get. So I got something back. So then I had to relook at my tithe. Well, am I going to give the tithe before the tax benefit or after the tax benefit? Okay. I always gave it. I'm not that good that I did it after the tax benefit. I took the government money back. So. Okay. I am going to, and I'm glad to see the TD, you're both here.
Shortly, we should have a second round.
Good. We're not ready. I'm just saying that we're going to be ahead of time, so I probably will wrap up in 15 minutes or whatever. Okay, perfect. So the TD people are going to talk about gifts as securities, because I got a preview of the presentation that they did so that we wouldn't duplicate. And they're going to talk all about the benefits of giving gifts as securities versus giving cash. If you have appreciated gifts as securities, not all of us have that, but those people who do have found it's very beneficial to give those. But you can't sell them and then give the money. You have to transfer them from your brokerage to a nonprofit brokerage. And I know Knox Oakville, because we do it lots of times, most of the churches in the PCC don't have their own broker that can handle receiving gifts as securities. And the ones who looked into it, it was pretty expensive for them to do so unless they had some big investment firm who was willing to do it for free. And sometimes there have been. So the majority of the congregations do it through the PCC's broker. And we don't charge any fees, the PCC, for this server. There are some brokerage fees that are charged for those gifts. 4 times a year there is a commission-free week where gifts can be sent to the PCC office, gifts under $10,000 Canadian or US. So as long as the value when it's sold is under 10,000 Canadian or US, those gifts don't pay a commission, and you save about $175, I think $200 in the end. So the PCC receives the gifts for a congregation. The proceeds are then transferred to the church. And sometimes the proceeds are a little bit different than the tax receipt, because the tax receipt is always issued the market value of the gift on the day it's received in our account. Our policy is to sell it as soon as possible, but sometimes that's overnight, it might be over the weekend. The stock may go up a little, it may go down a little. So if it goes up, more money sent to the church. If it goes down, a little less goes to the church, but you still get the same value on your receipt. So that's just for you to know. The bonus is that your tax receipt can be used both as a tax credit on your income taxes, the same way as if you'd given cash. You've got this receipt, but then you can also use it so that you don't have to pay your capital gains. And they're going to look at that more in depth. And we then send it to the congregation or ministry. On it, it usually takes about 4 weeks, sometimes 6 weeks, depends on the time of year. We process over $2 million for congregations, the majority of them given $5,000 to $10,000 at a time. So it just depends on the time of year. At the year end, if you want to give, we need to have it in our brokerage by December 31st. You won't get your tax receipt until the new year, and the church won't get the money until the new year. Usually we advertise the date that if you want the church to get the money this year, we've got to have it by usually December 15th or 10th or something like that in our brokerage. All right, so the other thing, they're going to talk about bequests and the advantages of bequests and the different types of bequests. I just want to say that if you want to go online or if you want to use our booklet, there's a few, this is about your will, and this is more than just a will. It's sort of an end-of-life planning to make sure that you have all your documents in the same place. You can follow this workbook, but there is suggested language. If you want to have an undesignated gift to the church, a designated gift, and even things for like a residual or a residual contingent trust, that's when you say, well, my spouse or my child is going to use this money, but when they pass away, then it might go to the church. Anyway, there's sort of some specific language. It's still pretty basic. Things like being sure that you've got the charitable number in there, so that if the congregation moves or is no longer at the same address, it's easy for a lawyer or people in the future to know what Knox Oakville did they actually mean. Yeah. So we've got all that online. And the big thing is, when you make a designated gift, if you're going to do it to the church, to make it as broad as possible and to have language in there that says, if the church is no longer doing this, it can go to something similar. So we've had ones where bequests have come in very specific, you know, like for the church's marching band. Well, they don't have a marching band anymore, but they do have a music program, you know, like, so some things, music, worship, this outreach, mission, those are broad enough. The church will probably always be doing that. Something specific, even for the bell, in the bell tower. Well, there was a hurricane that came down and the bell tower's not there anymore. It's like, but it's not enough to rebuild the bell tower. You know, it's just, it needs to be broad.
That was my question.
And charitable gift annuities are the one thing that doesn't talk, and that's something, though, that the PCC provides for people. So a charitable gift annuity. Anyone know what an annuity is? Yeah. An annuity is an income. You give money usually to an insurance company, and then they give you money for life. That's how the commercial is done on TV. This is your money for life. So there's a percentage that is paid out for you for life. And with a charitable gift annuity, you give the money to the church, and the church agrees to pay you an amount for that money for life. That is using both the capital and the interest. But it's designed so that at least 20% of the annuity is going to be, of the value of the annuity when you made the gift, will be left there in the gift. And so when you die, the money that's left in the annuity goes to the congregation. So this is attractive for people who are like, I know I want to leave $100,000, I'd like to leave $100,000 to the church, but I don't know how long I'm going to live, so I need to really live off the income for that year. The annuities are fairly conservative. I'm going to give you, here we go. They're usually fairly conservative. The amounts are based on conservative investments. So as if we had invested the money in the bonds. So they're based on the bond rates, but it's an actuarial calculation which says how long do we think you're going to live. and then using the bond rates, if that was invested in the bond and we paid you back this money. We invest the funds in the CPP's consolidated fund, so that's a little bit higher risk, but it's, it's sort of invested in that. So usually the money is retained and the church gets a larger gift than if it had been invested in bonds. So we've had, for example, people get an annuity and then they've died 20 or 30 years later, and there's still quite a bit left in the annuity because it was getting better returns than what the quote is based on. But we get these quotes from ECLR, it's very professionally done, it's ecumenical, so we do it together. And this is just an example, and it all depends on the bond rate at the time, but somebody getting a $75,000 gift annuity would get a receipt for 25, or if it was a 84-year-old single woman, they'd get the receipt for $25,000, and so almost a third of the value, which they can use against their income, and then they get an annual income of $5,000, which is at a rate of 7.110 and 100% tax-free. And you can think, well, this is fairly high, like, depends what the bond rates are right now. But the reason it's high is because it's using that capital and that interest, and they're thinking an 84-year-old woman is probably going to live 15 years, maybe 20 years these days. If they're Presbyterian, honestly, I think we have a higher number of people living 99 to 100 years than anywhere else.
Quality of life in the PCC.
Yeah, quality of life, absolutely.
Not on me.
And this is ecumenical, so we've got the Catholics in here as well. Yeah.
Karen, in the first line, the $75,000, I'm assuming that is after tax dollars, right? You can't use like an RSP to go into this?
That's right. You can use, we've had people use gifts as securities before, not RSPs. RSPs or RIFs, you've already had your tax relief. You're not getting a double tax relief.
Right.
But so your $75,000, that's going to be, we have had people use gifts as securities to acquire them, but again, you then only get the benefit on whatever the proportion this is, so that's like a third of the gift, because only a third of the securities would be considered a gift. But we can do those calculations if you want to do it that way. Yeah. And the quotes, Maggie, if anyone wants to know this, they send the information to Maggie. She can give quotes for different values, different sizes, because a smaller gift gets a smaller receipt as a proportion, because there's a bit of administration fees worked into the calculation as well. All right, this is my close to final slide, so yay.
Voices
for me.
holding up. Yeah, great.
Yeah. You don't have to be rich.
Not like me.
No, yeah, I know. You're going to live so much. But a gift of any size makes a difference. When I was also giving a presentation to a group, and I said, anyone know if a bequest had been left to the church? This year we were talking about bequests, the role of bequests, and one is I'm the treasurer. I can tell you there was a bequest left of $5,000 and a bequest left of $100,000. So you put them together, and that's $105,000 for the ministry of the church. When we pool our funds together, we can do incredible things. 20 gifts of $5,000 equals another $100,000. So we're, again, back to that scripture. We're asked to give out of what we've been given. If we have $5,000 to give, praise God. If we have $100,000 to give, that's amazing. And you know, it's really cool to see the churches who have received a big bequest who had no idea. Well, that person was so frugal. They lived so simply. Well, they also didn't have any children, and they had a house that was in the middle of, downtown Oakville that got sold, and or they had the money in the bank account. So we never know what resources people are given. We just teach, and then God works on people's hearts. So, and again, when we pool our gifts together, God will do incredible things beyond our imagination. So there's my contact information. I'm happy to talk to people. I do celebrate all the gifts. I can say that Knox Oakville has been doing planned giving for a long time, and that you're one of the churches that receives the most gifts of securities per capita than any other church. I'm pretty soon you have a vision for what gifts will do. If anybody has a question, if I leave a bequest to the church, or if I want to give a gift of securities, talk to your trustees, talk to your session, because this church has a plan. They know exactly what they're going to do with that money and how it's going to be spent. And I think it's amazing the things that you're doing and the impact that you have and the legacy that you're leaving in Oakville. So thank you for your gifts, and for the people I have met over the years who are very generous here.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Karen. Do we want to take a couple of minute break? There's still food over there, coffee, pop and everything.
Here, can I just ask a question of Karen?
Sure, go ahead.
Karen, I really liked that opening slide you had. You're not giving to a budget, but you get into I'm going to call it the dilemma, the issue of the donor wants to do it for a purpose, but we've got a budget that we'd like to advocate. And I got your point about we should tell everybody they should be aware of what the budget is.
You know what?
There's a kind of a conversation there.
Yeah, the role of undesignated giving versus designated giving. Absolutely, perfect question. When I started and worked at the Relief and Development Agency, PWS&D, 1996, so once a while ago, we were having this debate. Should we do emergency appeals when a disaster happens, or shouldn't we? Should we just encourage people to give undesignated, and we'll respond to emergencies out of the undesignated gifts? And then when I came to stewardship, I heard that exact same question from congregations. Should we encourage people to give to the undesignated fund of the church, or do we do designated gifts? So what I discovered with PWS&D was every time they had an emergency appeal, every year, the undesignated gifts also went up. So it was interesting. Not only did the whole pot go up, because they got in these designated gifts that they wouldn't have received otherwise, but the whole pot went up. They also, just maybe 5%, sometimes 10%. So they kind of followed the ebb. So I would say, first of all, there are some people in your congregation who will never give undesignated gifts to the church. They're not a member of the church, maybe. They've never been taught it. It's not been important to them. Maybe they've got some trauma in their life that they don't trust the session or the treasurers or whatever. But if you ask them and say, we want to send a kid to camp. Oh yeah, I went to camp. Camp really meant a lot to me. I'm going to give some money to send a kid to camp. You want to do VBS? I want to reach out of the cold or something like that. You know what? Oh, my brother is on the street. That's really important to me. I'm going to support the out of the cold. So it's important to realize some people will give designated gifts who won't give undesignated gifts. So you increase the pot you have, but you want to balance it out. Oh, then the other thing is that you'll have people who give undesignated gifts. So I say I sign up for my PAR, or I give my monthly gift to the church. That doesn't mean that I don't give when it's time to send kids to camp or when a disaster happens. I give undesignated, plus I give over and above. So I hear that message, like we don't want to always be asking for money, we're always asking for money. Just think in yourself that you're asking different people, that different people hear the messages differently, and always remember, keep that thing. We're asking you to give according to you as you can. If this is something that means to you, give and support it. Yeah.
One of my favorite things out of the Kenny Callahan work was about the giving doors.
Yeah.
Right? And some of you will have seen the slide that we have with different colored doors on it that talks about, lots of ways to give at Knox. That comes directly out of this conversation that people want to have options or need to have options. The person on a fixed income can do the undesignated. They know exactly how much every month, but they can't give extra. Other people can't give extra on this side of the grave, but on the other side, it's all coming through. Just having all these different ways to give.
Yeah.
I wasn't sure if you want to talk about.
Yeah, and that's
Giving
exactly,
gifts.
and then the bequest too. Ideally, we'd like every bequest to come undesignated. But sometimes somebody is passionate about something
Yeah.
for whatever reason, and so if we can do it and then we say, actually, here was an interesting one. I heard a church and they said they figured out what was the baseline, what did they need? Because they were down to the point where they were trying to decide, can we stay open, do we have to close? So they looked at the baseline, they said, okay, to heat the building, pay all those expenses, and to pay the minister, this is our absolute baseline. They realized that there was no money in that for mission or ministry. Well, I would say close your doors, but they were like, we don't want to close. But they said, what we're going to do is we're going to support that with the offerings, but we commit as a community to fundraising over the year for the extra 10% that we want to do to mission and ministry, like to mission. So they had decided that they would spread it out over the 12. So I'm just going to say it was $120,000. They wanted to raise $12,000 for mission and ministry independently as a community. So then they said, okay, well, we'll do $1,000 a month. Well, like January, there's the AGM, everybody's busy, not the best time for fundraising. January passed, didn't do anything. February passed, didn't do anything. Suddenly March, they're scrambling. Oh, we have to make up those 2 months. But somebody had a brilliant idea and said, we already do a fundraiser at the fair in the summertime that raises quite a bit of money. So we're going to make sure all the money for that is going to mission and ministry. We're going to, I forget what it was that they were doing. And then once we've done that fair, we'll know how much we need to raise for the last half of the month, or the year, sorry. And so they did, and they found that at the fair they raised $10,000. And so they're, oh, well, that's pretty good. We only have to raise, another $2,000. Well, in the end, they raised $20,000 instead of their original $12,000. So as long as the heart is there, as long as the intention is there, as long as our churches do not exist just to heat the building and put electricity on, but if we're doing mission and ministry together, that's why people tell me all the time, oh, we don't have the money to give to Presbyterian sharing. And I'm just like, well, did you even try?
No.
Did you even ask? Like, did you share the stories of what we do together? Did you try anything different? No. They just sort of looked at the money coming in on the offering plate.
Yeah.
Yeah, you don't want to do that. Okay, great. Any other questions? Because I originally, honestly, was going to stay until the end of the TD presentation because I always learn. But I'm thinking that I'll probably head out before then. So thank you for your time and your...
Thank you very much, Karen. So we'll take a couple of minutes break now and replenish your drinks. Prepare yourself for TDW PIC.
Make sure you put in hours.
folks, we're back. Our TD Wealth Private Investment Council colleagues are here. I'd like to introduce them. As I said in my earlier introduction, we've been dealing with Tim and Nathan since January 2023. We did put our, in 2022 we decided to look for a new investment advisor, and I think we had discussions with 5 different parties, and TDW PIC impressed us much more than the other potential investment advisors. And since they've taken over in January 2023, the transition was very easy. And since then, the level of service has been excellent. The guys and their support team respond very quickly. Every time we ask for something, we get same-day replies, and usually action. We don't ask for anything too complicated, but usually action within a day or two, and we have the funds we need to fund whatever activities we're doing. So I'd like to thank both the guys. I won't go into your bios. I know you're both highly qualified. You've got all sorts of FCAs and FICs after your names. An MBA from McMaster. I'm not so sure about Nathan. I didn't see your university, but a lot of experience, a lot of designations, and a lot of good service we've received from you. So Tim Caughey and Nathan Sly, and I'll leave it to the gentlemen to take us the rest of it. I did say in the opening introduction, I think the agenda we sent you, we said there would be a joint question period at the end. I think given the numbers that we've got, it's easier if we just have interactive. So I've already told the folks, throw your hand up or just yell out if something doesn't make sense as you go, because if you go for an hour, after 5 minutes, they may think of something and forget it by the end of the hour. So the folks are primed to yell at you if they don't understand something.
Good, yeah, please do.
All right, so I'll pass it over to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Ian. I think maybe I should ask for a recording of this presentation after we're done here. The glowing introduction. I am grateful for the opportunity to be here today. It's wonderful to be here with you to talk about charitable giving. And I know I listened to a little bit of Karen's presentation when we first came in, and I feel like she gave you a very good holistic view of charitable giving. And what we're going to do here today is get more into the details of some of the options that are available to you potentially for the sake of your gifting endeavors. A little bit of housekeeping just at the outset. I am not here in a capacity to make a financial recommendation to anybody, right? What we need to do is talk about options. Some of these strategies may be suitable from a short, medium, long-term perspective, but I would encourage you to speak to your own advisors. I encourage you to talk to your tax accountants to make qualified decisions about those strategies and how they may relate to your circumstance. Okay? I think I'm going to stand over on this side, Nathan. And that way I can maybe cue you to turn the slides.
Yep, sure.
So we'll get right into, I guess I'll start with some indications of what clients are asking us, because my day-to-day and Nathan's day-to-day is really, we deal with stocks and bonds. We deal with solutions that are a means to an end, but what is that end point? What are clients wanting to do with their money, in terms of achieving lifelong objectives? And increasingly we're finding that we have clients on the private client side who have families, and maybe the kids, at one point they thought there would be a need for gifting to the kids and getting them into their first homes, etc. But the kids are doing just fine, and portfolios, I'm sure most of you are aware, markets have been doing quite well recently. They're thinking about objectives that are more in line with charitable giving and leaving a legacy. And so there's lots of questions that we'll receive from clients about charitable giving. And you can see here, we put some of them on the screen. This comes from our Private Giving Foundation, but effectively, what we're being asked of is how do we contribute most effectively from a tax perspective? There's all these different strategies we could look at. We have diversified portfolios. What assets do we look to draw on in order to fulfill our legacy objectives? And then what type of vehicle do we use? So we're going to talk about some simple strategies, and some of those came up in the discussion with Karen, but also there are other elaborate strategies like donor advised funds. I'll talk a little bit about insurance-based strategies that could be right depending on your circumstance and your objective. And so providing information to clients on these matters is extremely important to them. It's important to us. So Nathan and I spend a lot of time working with our clients as well on these, what I'll call kind of peripheral matters. again, we're stocks and bonds, and that's what we do each day in terms of investing for clients, but we will bring in experts. So at our team at Private Investment Counsel, we have estate planners, we have estate lawyers who will join us round table with clients and have these discussions in a more meaningful way. But saying that, I feel qualified that I could be here today to give you a good overview of some of these strategies that we're seeing happen and these opportunities that are available to you. So we'll go forward to slide 5, please. So in terms of why are people making these donations and what are they trying to achieve? I mean, obviously, donating and philanthropy rather is something that's deeply personal to each of us, right? What is it that we're trying to achieve with the monies that we're going to give? Social impact, very important. I can tell you we're seeing a lot more donations being made now to food banks, right? The cost of living, the cost of food. We've noted a big uptick in those donations in the last year, and these are clients that are donating securities to local food banks. In addition to that, sometimes it's an expression of gratitude. Often it'll be a family member who is ill and gets wonderful treatment at the Oakville Hospital, and so in light of that, there's a desire to give back, right, and to give to the hospital's foundation. We'll speak a little bit more about the monetary side of it. We're dollars and cents driven. We'll talk about tax credits. We'll talk about opportunities to be efficient with your gifting. In terms of the tax regime and what's available from the standpoint of those credits, the CRA does have a fairly, what I would describe as a fairly rewarding or lucrative sort of system for giving. It's very much promoting individuals to gift. What you get when you donate monies to a registered charity, you receive a tax credit, right? And obviously that tax credit can be used to reduce your balance of your taxes owing at the end of the year. And how it works out, you get both a federal and a provincial tax credit. And you can see on the first $200, it works out to a 15 and 5, or call it 20% tax credit, combined tax credit for the first $200. And then amounts above that, it jumps dramatically. We're talking 40%. So for most people, unless your average tax rate's over 40%, you find that the monies that you give above $200 is, basically a nice tax offset. And certainly if you're giving more than that, then the federal credit becomes 33% over $235,000. There are some limits. So if you have significant, and where this comes into play really is mainly around legacy. If your estate makes a large donation to a registered charity, then you may have a charitable donation that exceeds your final year life taxable income. And so if that's the case, you might need to use the carry back or carry forward provisions for charitable giving. So there are some limits in terms of what you can do to reduce your taxable income. For spouses, pooling those charitable donations, making sure that we use them against the individual with the higher tax rate. It's certainly something you want to think about from an optimization standpoint. And then just the last point, it must be a registered charity with CRA. One of the considerations, if you are going to name a registered charity as a beneficiary in your will, just make sure that you keep tabs on that registered charity over time, because they specifically have to be on a list that is maintained by CRA. And sometimes we do a will and then 5, 10, 15 years pass. Oh, is that entity still a registered charity? Is still recognized by the CRA? So do keep an eye on that as you think about estate planning. Over to the next slide. All right, so let's talk about different types of donations that can be rendered. So firstly, cash donations. Charities appreciate these foremost, right? Because this is going to be money that you might bring to church, you might put in an envelope, or maybe you write a check when you come to church. Perhaps you have an EFT, an automated deduction from your bankroll. From the standpoint of a church or a registered charity, having that recurring cash flow, very, very important for maintaining budget. Right, so everything I tell you beyond here, please don't disregard this. Very, very important. Okay, short term, really great way to express your gratitude to the church. Okay, it's very simple, it's expedient, it's flexible, all of these things. But really, the bottom line is that what you give at the end of the year, you're going to get a tax receipt for the cumulative value of what you've given through the course of the tax year. Okay. Donation of securities are something you may want to do in addition to cash donation, right? So, and Karen touched a little bit on the idea of donating securities in kind. So, if you do have an investment portfolio, if you do own stocks or bonds or mutual funds, and if they have appreciated in a taxable account, you can approach your advisor or your institution where you're doing your investing, and you can inform them of your desire to make an in-kind transfer of those securities to a registered charity. Okay, when you do that, the government says it's a zero rate capital gains inclusion. So you don't pay any taxes on the difference between what you purchased the security at and what it was at the point that transfer is received. Okay, so that can be very, very opportune, especially if you've had a share or a fund that's gone up significantly on a percentage value. You really want to look at if you have a portfolio that's diversified, you want to look at that individual security that's gone up the most on a percentage basis, and that's going to give you your best bang for your buck in terms of what share or security should be donated in kind. We do this a fair amount. We're often on the receiving end. We do manage money for a number of hospital foundations, colleges, and they do receive securities in kind frequently. We also have gifted. We've had clients who've gifted to other organizations. So we can handle this sort of transaction fairly easily. It does not cost any monies for clients to do this. Usually what we would do, we recommend a 30-day period. So if this is of interest to you, please don't wait to the end of the year. Do not wait till December 15th to do an in-kind transfer. You can account on 15 days for both the delivering institution and the receiving institution to book the transfer. So if you want to have the tax benefit in the current year, I'm going to recommend you start before December 1st and start to talk to your advisor about that. If it is something that you wanted to do for the sake of Knox Presbyterian Church and you wanted to donate securities in kind, we can receive those to the accounts we have set up today. Okay, so very easy to do. What you would want to do is give our names to your existing advisor. They can be in touch with us. You can talk to your advisor about what securities and how much you want to donate. All right? We look over to the next page, a very simple mathematical example. I'll quickly run this example with you just to show you the details. And this is an example where we were looking at a $20,000 investment. Okay? And I think Karen very aptly said, look, scale and size and the amount you donate is very personal. We've seen donations for just $1,000 or $2,000 in securities. So don't feel, as I talk about numbers here, everything is in proportion to what you want to give and what you feel good about gifting, right? But what you've got here is a $20,000 security that's been sold. So there was a large capital gain. It was bought at $10,000. It appreciated in price by $10,000, so it was $20,000 at the point of sale. Now, when you sell a security at a gain in Canada, you're forced for an inclusion rate of 50% of that gain. So 5,000 or 50% of the 10,000 is taxable, and at 5,000, based on an income of 100,000, which is just the amount we chose for this individual in question, it's about a 30% tax rate. Is what it works out to, $1,600. So you get a donation tax credit. Again, this would be fairly lucrative, but 40%, which is close to $8,000. You pay $1,600 in tax. Okay, the net tax savings is $6,367. Very simply, if you donate the shares, the $20,000 fair market value, you avoid paying any capital gain, right? And you get the same tax credit, and your net tax savings is $7,992. So you just eliminate these capital gains. Always better to donate security in kind than sell the security and donate cash proceeds. That's all this is sharing. On to the next. All right, let's switch gears. Private Giving Foundation is donor advised funds. And basically about 20 years ago, TD had the foresight to be actually the first major bank in Canada to open a donor advised funds program. Nathan and I do manage money for some very wealthy families that have set up their own private foundation. Right? Fantastic. I mean, some of the parks in Hamilton have been retrofitted by this family. The skating loop in Waterdown, if you know that, they built that. Some wonderful initiatives that they can do with significant money. But to set up a private foundation, you've got to work with an accountant. You've got to have a lawyer do all the paperwork to get that foundation set up. For most people, unless you're dealing with a lot of scale, there's no economic value in setting up your own private foundation. But wouldn't we all love to have our own private foundation? Right? Wouldn't it be awesome? I mean, you could decide the charities you feel most passionate about. You give the money every year. Well, we'd all love to be able to do that. Well, TD said, let's go and set up a private giving foundation that all of our clients can tap into and utilize. So I just want you to think about this as having TD set up the infrastructure to have a foundation that anyone can then open an account and donate securities to. And then they have basically their own private foundation. And it's really neat. We actually allow the clients then to name their own foundation. So Mr. and Mrs. Jones Family Foundation, it's an account that's set up under the TD Private Giving Foundation. The client then can decide, is it a cash donation or is it a security donation that goes into the account? $10,000 is the minimum. Once the money goes into the account, they get a tax receipt for that which they've contributed. And then inside the account, it's invested for them. So you can have that, so you put $10,000 in, you're gonna get a $10,000 tax receipt. You're gonna have that money then invested for you, and it will grow over time, that's the point. But every year then you decide whom you wanna see those, the donations go to, right? So you can allocate it to one registered charity, might be 100% Knox Presbyterian Church Oakville, right? But it could be multiple registered charities. So this is a great tool if you wanna set up a lasting legacy for your family. And in fact, you can set it up so that it pays in perpetuity. So even after you pass away, this foundation can continue to grow and can continue to be your lasting legacy to those registered charities you feel most passionate about. The nice thing about the Private Giving Foundation,
Question?
yes, question.
Is there a maximum amount of money that has to be given out each year from that charity?
Great question. I believe it's 5%.
I think so.
Yeah, I believe 5% every year has to be given out, but you could name your charities. I've had clients who funded this and given the whole thing out in year one. I've had clients who now, we started with $10,000 and they see the value in it and they're adding more and more over time. Okay, so this is definitely a really neat option, and what it does, it imparts flexibility. And some of that flexibility you can't get when you name a registered charity in your will. Right? When you name a registered charity in your will, you got to change your will if you want to change the charity. Whereas over here, okay, you can change every year you can change your registered charity. So this is a unique opportunity. Again, it's available for a minimum of $10,000, which I think makes us I want to say we might be the lowest threshold for donor advised funds, maybe even in Canada, to be able to start an account.
And
Yes.
just fees-wise, is there a management fee that?
Great question. So what happens, it's a balanced fund. The TD will, so there's no discretion on that account. I can't manage that account for clients.
Right.
It's a set fund that is, that all clients of the Private Giving Foundation are invested in. And yes, there is an MER, management expense ratio, on that fund.
Investments.
Yeah, if anyone's interested about that, Nathan's contact information's there. You don't have to be my client to set up an account in this. So anyone who's interested could do that. Yes.
Can you have, I guess, either your heirs or an executor to manage the balance of where they go after you're gone?
That's a very good question. Generally speaking, you're going to have your estate wound up, so your executor's responsibilities will be absolved, but you can
Right.
provide direction to the Private Giving Foundation in advance to your demise, and what you set up at that time can be set for perpetuity.
Right, okay, so you could designate one of your heirs, for example, to manage where this goes after you're gone? Or not really?
I haven't encountered that scenario
Okay.
in terms of whether or not it can be managed thereafter by an appointed individual. I
Okay.
need to take that away.
So essentially you end up, the idea is this sort of winds up after you're gone. It's not intended to keep on going.
No, it can actually keep on going, but it would be your final direction that it's
Okay,
going to
okay,
keep
fair
paying you
enough,
to.
okay.
And
The
you
trouble,
can
the trouble
actually,
is, your final direction depends on certain charities still being around, perhaps.
right, in the cases where the charity ceases to exist, I do
Yeah.
believe that the Private Giving Foundation can get involved in those scenarios.
Just do a
Yes,
rebalancing or
yes,
something.
and they
Okay,
can change
okay,
the
yeah, okay.
grants. that-
Sure,
that are
okay.
made.
Yeah, okay.
You can actually name the Private Giving, if you've had one of these accounts, you can set the Private Giving Foundation up as a beneficiary of your estate. Right, so your money then can go over to your PGF and continue to pay out after you passed away.
Okay.
Okay, let's talk a little bit about the estates and bequests that can be made through your will. And so yes, we do have clients that will name registered charities outright in their will to receive either a fixed amount, dollar amount, or a percentage amount. Speak to your estate lawyer about which is better for your scenario. There are some pitfalls about naming percentages because you can have a change in the estate, the size of your estate can basically mean it such that if you have family members that also receive a portion of your estate, they may receive significantly less than what they otherwise would be intended to receive. So that's something that's important to consider. If you do name a registered charity in your will, we've had clients who've done this, and if they name a couple, 2 or 3 different registered charities, you will be opening up your estate to the views of the registered charity. They will be interested parties in understanding what your total assets are, and to make sure that either the dollar amount or the percentage that you named to that charity is received by the charity. In my experience too, I would say it does slow down the distribution of your estate as those parties are brought into the fray and are dealt with with your executor. So there are some issues to be aware of with naming a registered charity as a major beneficiary of your estate. But if you do name that charity as a part of your will, the amount that goes to them would create a charitable tax receipt that then can be used against your taxes in your final year of life. I believe it can be used 2 years, a year in advance of that as well. So there's significant opportunities to reduce your total tax burden by having a registered charity obviously named in your will. Okay. RSPs, RIFs, TFSAs, yes, you can go ahead and name a charity as the beneficiary of these account types. You can do that either in your will, or you can have your investment provider do a beneficiary election and name them outright on the statement. If you do both, just make sure that they're aligned nicely. You don't want to create problems there where you have different elections. Usually the will would win out. But one of the considerations with RIFs is that when you pass away, if you have a spouse, it rolls over tax-free to the spouse. So do not go forth and do, like if you have, the 2 of you are alive right now, do not go and name the registered charity out right now. It's the surviving spouse, right, that is going to want, otherwise your spouse is not going to be happy with you, right? The RIF, they thought they were going to get tax-free as God. So just be aware of that tax-free rollover is available on the passing of the first and on the the surviving spouse that may want to consider their beneficiary election and name a registered charity. When you pass away, the second spouse, the remaining balance of your RIF is deemed to be taxable income. So you're going to be relying on your executors are going to be looking at that tax receipt from the registered charity to reduce your taxable income. All right. There is some advantages to this approach. Like those payments will be made very expediently. If you have a charity that is your beneficiary on your RIF, 30 days after passing, there'll be a check going to that registered charity. Okay, if you name them in your will, very likely your will is going to go through probate, and that's going to take 3-6 months. I mean, depends on the court, depends how busy they are. It's gotten a little better than it was maybe a couple of years ago. During COVID, it was terrible. Everything was terrible. So, not surprisingly, but that's a consideration there. And so, yeah, so there's lots of great interplay between these 2 options. Yes, John?
I'm thinking about the tax benefit, if you like, upon death or around that event. And I'm thinking about what's driving the tax liability that we're trying to mitigate upon death. And for most of us, probably it's only on an investment portfolio that's unregistered as opposed to your registered investments. There might be some capital gains sitting in there. Because not in your home, because that's
principal residence. Yeah.
So are there any other examples, tax liabilities that we're trying to mitigate?
Yeah, I mean, for the most part, it's going to be your registered plans. I always tell my clients, spend your RIFs, spend your RIFs, spend your RIFs, right? Because I don't want to sit with your kids and tell them, here's $500,000 went to the government. Because it's taxable income your last year for the surviving spouse.
Right.
So that's going to be your biggest tax liability. Aside from that, you're quite right. If you have a non-registered account, you have what's called a deemed disposition. All of your assets are sold on the day you pass. That's taxable. If you have a corporation, all right, if everyone's a corporate account holder, some of these strategies we're going to talk about next on insurance are very, very applicable as a way of providing a nice tax offset.
I know that TFSA what I have, if you don't spend it anyway, it matures as you get older.
So the TFSA will continue, if you leave it in the TFSA, it will continue to compound in your favor in your whole life.
That's what I was told.
Yeah, that's right.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, often I think of TFSAs as being the last account you're really going to draw on. right? Because it's tax-free. So why would you invest in a taxable account if you can have a tax-free account? So
Yeah.
they're long-term investment vehicles.
But with the RSPs, you used to have to.
Yeah, those ones at 71, you have to convert it to a RIF,
Yeah,
and you
yeah.
have to start taking the money out, and
Yeah,
it's taxable
yeah,
income.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, yeah. So sometimes it can be a bit of a tax burden to have a RIF, unfortunately. Okay, we'll turn over and talk a little bit about insurance. So, for the right individuals, whereby they want to see a more substantial gift to the church or registered charity, insurance-based strategies can be a very good option. If you have an existing insurance policy, okay, you could assign that policy, you could assign the ownership to the charity. If you did that, then there would be a deemed disposition of your insurance policy, but you could receive a charitable tax receipt for the cash value. Basically do a fair market value assessment of the insurance policy and you'll get a tax receipt for that value, okay? If you are of the mindset that you would like to have an insurance policy for the benefit of the church down the road, okay, you can go out and purchase a life insurance policy and you can pay the premiums but name the church as the beneficiary on that insurance policy. When you pass away, the church will receive the fair market or the face value of the insurance policy, and your estate will receive a tax receipt for the full value. Okay? So,
Sorry, Tim,
yes.
how long does that process take to happen?
So to do any of these insurance-based strategies, medical underwriting is a very important point. So you have to be in reasonably good medical health. If you've had cancer in the past 5 years, you're not going to be insurable. If you've had a major cardiac event, not insurable. If you had a stroke, possibly not insurable. Then there's a whole host of medical conditions that would deem you to be not insurable. Often what I'll do is I'll say to couples, because really you want the church to receive monies on the passing of the second, go into the underwriting together on what's called a joint last to die basis. Because if one spouse is 75 and the other spouse is 70, the joint life might be in the low 60s, and that's the value which is used to determine the premium. So you save money by having a joint last to die policy. If one of the spouses is unwell or has some medical condition and the other spouse is free and clear, they very likely could get an offer that would not be tenable if it was just the less healthier spouse alone, right? So this is a great way to go about using insurance, joint last to die. But it is this is a substantial commitment. We're a long way from a cash donation at the queue, or in church, right, in the pews. This is about doing something that will pay out using permanent life insurance policy down the road. Now, if you do it such that the ownership is with the church, so you're the life insured, but the church owns the policy. If you pay the premiums, that becomes an eligible payment for a registered charity tax receipt. So think about it this way. Imagine a scenario, and I always say to anybody think about insurance, like it doesn't have to be face value driven. You don't need to say, oh, I'm going to do 100,000, I'm going to do $1 million. You can do it cash flow driven. So if your situation today is you do $100 a month to the church, you could come and say, well, give me a policy that's going to allow me to put $1,200 a year, $100 a month, into an insurance policy that will pay out on my passing, that you'll get the same charitable tax receipt for that $1,200 as you would if you were just writing a check to the church, right? But then when you pass away, that policy will fall to the church, right? Yes, question.
Can you do this partially where, okay, we have 3 kids, but I could say perhaps in the beneficiary side that the church gets, say, 10% of whatever that amount is? And therefore,
yes, you can.
Does that make it so that 10% of the premiums that you pay through the year are also tax deductible?
It's a very specific question. I think the answer to that's yes,
Okay.
but you'd want to check with your advisor to confirm that and before you go through the process further.
Either that or you start another policy altogether again.
Yeah, the one thing about going the route of insurance, like, you don't, so you've got a will today and it's been in place for a while. You say you got 3 kids and you want them each to get a third. Like, maybe you don't want to meddle with having a registered charity in your will, right? But you want want to do something for the church and you want to take it outside your will, insurance is really great for that, because what will happen is that when you pass away, if you have an insurance policy and you've named the church as the beneficiary, it goes outside your will, which is important. It does not attract, so if it's $100,000 and you have an estate value of over $500,000, which most people would if they own a home, right? It's going to be a 1.5% probate tax. Right? So you can save $1,500 in taxes by using this strategy versus putting a bequest in your will for $100,000. The other thing is, your will is a matter of public record. If you wanted to make this donation anonymously, if you wanted it to be more of a secret thing, insurance is fantastic for that. It's creditor protection. You know, nobody. So your will, as I said, it's public record. You can go to a court and you can actually ascertain a copy of people's will. You may not know that, but you can. This would then bypass the will. So if you wanted something there, if you didn't want to go through the process of updating your will, but you're okay to do the medical underwriting, insurance can be a decent strategy to actually exist in tandem with your existing will. Just ignore this bit about irrevocable beneficiary. That's for corporate. If anyone has a corporation and has a desire to do philanthropic giving using insurance, they've got the best scenario. They clearly do, because of some of the mechanisms that allow you to get money through what's called the capital dividend account of a corporation. It's very, very powerful. So that may be something, I'm going to leave it at that, because it's a little bit more detailed and probably not purposeful for our discussion today. But if there is someone who's got a Canadian corporation and is looking to do charitable giving, they've got an advantage maybe to the rest of us. Okay, turn over to the page. Okay, this is where I'm going to say, look, everything's scalable. I didn't design this. Okay, somebody at TD came up with these ideas, and we've got $1 million policy here, right? But what you can do is you can have a policy such that the church is the owner of the policy. And a lot of these permanent policies are what we call 10-pays, where you're obligated to make 10 years worth of premiums and then you're done. So in this example, all we're doing is we're looking at using cash of $60,000 per year for 10 years to fund $1 million benefit for the church, versus donating shares in kind at $50,000 a year, paying no capital gains tax, and doing the same thing. Also have $1 million. To cut to the chase, without going through all the math behind this, you're going to save $100,000 in taxes by going the route of donating shares. So you actually, and I think Karen mentioned this briefly, is that you can have it such that you've agreed to have this insurance policy on your life. You will fund the policy by making security donations. And again, it says $60,000, but let's say it's $6,000, something much more reasonable. If it's $6,000, you would make that contribution every year. You'd avoid the cap gains on the $6,000 that you're donating. Plus, you would get a charitable tax receipt for $6,000 every year. And then the church, I don't know, they're doing something special for you later on, right? If you've done a policy of that magnitude, certainly. So this is just an illustration of the strategy. And again, all of us are different. All of us have different capabilities and needs. Some of these strategies might make sense for you, maybe not all of them. Some of them together might make sense for an individual, right? Donating securities, having a bequest in your will, these can work in tandem. So on to the next. Yeah, so if you're interested in stock donations or mutual fund donations or bond donations, I think the way the bond market's gone the last year, you could even get a bond donation. It'd be the first in my career, but it might happen. Please contact your advisor, give them your information. We can handle it right here. There's no cost to you unless your existing advisor charges a fee for transfer. Most of them don't. We don't charge a fee to receive that asset. We would receive it, we would sell it. The next day, when we've settled the trade, they could take the money out and be in the church bank account. Very, very quick. But please, just if you're thinking about doing it, please let us know by December 1st, say, so we can get it done in the current tax year. Private Giving Foundation, fantastic strategy. If you're interested, you can let us know. And then lastly, just sort of a motherhood statement, just to say, look, make sure you talk to a professional. Each of you has a different tax situation. I can't begin to opine on that, so you need to just speak to the people you need to make these good decisions. That takes me to the end. Okay? Thank you.
any additional questions? Poor Nathan got to sit there and didn't get to present anything, but that's usually the way it is, I think. Nathan, Jim, I have to apologise in my introduction of you. I need to make an apology. We wanted to have the big green chairs available, but as usual, Ian was left in charge of ordering green chairs, and we ended up with 2 brown ones. So sorry, we're not in line with the TD branding, but next time there'll be green chairs.
Yeah. We've unfortunately had our own problems recently, so it's okay, very forgivable. Thank you.
It went from green to brown.
Anything else? Well, again, thank you very much to
Thank you.
Tim and Nathan. And I think that concludes this session. As I said at the start, both TDW PIC and Karen gave contact details if anyone did want to contact them, if you think about anything in your personal circumstances after the session. But I'd like to thank all the attendees for your patience today with some of the technical issues and the slight timing, or the timing being slightly off. But thank you very much for attending. And again, please let your trustees know if you have any questions for us, or you can contact the TDW PIC folks or Karen at the Presbyterian Church of Canada. Thank you very much. That's the end of the session.